Imagine this. It's the year 1241. You're a knight in Poland, and you've just received a message that makes your blood run cold. The Mongols are coming. And not just any army, an army that has already destroyed Beijing, flattened Baghdad, reduced the mightiest cities of Persia to rubble. An army that has never, not once, lost a major campaign. And within months, they crush the combined forces of Poland and Hungary. 2 battles, 2 countries, days apart. Nothing stands between them and Western Europe. And then they stop. They turn around, and they never come back. Why? That's where the story gets interesting, because the reason the Mongols stopped, and the reason they eventually collapsed entirely, follows a pattern so precise you can see it playing out today. Welcome back. Today we're breaking down how the greatest empire the world has ever seen destroyed itself from the inside, and why the exact same forces are at work right now in the 21st century. Let's start at the beginning. Because the rise of the Mongols is one of the most improbable stories in human history. Temujin, the man who would become Genghis Khan, was born into a minor tribe on the Mongolian steppe. His father was poisoned by rivals when Temujin was 9 years old. His family was abandoned by their own clan and left to die. He was enslaved as a teenager. This is not the background of someone destined for world domination. And yet, by the time he died in 1227, Genghis Khan had conquered more territory in 25 years than Rome did in 4 centuries. How? 3 things that most empires never figure out at the same time. First, radical meritocracy. In most medieval armies, your rank was determined by your bloodline. Genghis Khan didn't care who your father was. You performed, you got promoted. Simple as that. Second, psychological warfare. Before anyone had a word for it, the Mongols didn't just fight you. They made sure everyone knew what happened to people who fought them. Cities that surrendered were spared. Cities that resisted were made into examples. Word spread faster than the armies did. And third, speed. Mongol cavalry could cover 60 to 100 miles a day. European knights in full armor managed maybe 25. By the time defenders had organized a response, the Mongols were already behind them. The result? In less than 30 years, the largest contiguous land empire in human history. No one before or since has come close. Here's a question nobody asks enough. What do you do after you win? Genghis Khan was brilliant at conquering, but running an empire that spans 24 million square kilometers, with no internet, no telephone, no trains, not even proper roads in most of it, that's a completely different skill set. A message from the Mongolian capital to the western edge of the empire took months to arrive. By the time a governor received instructions and sent a reply, 6 months could have passed. In politics and war, 6 months is an eternity. This is the overextension trap, and it's the first crack in every great empire. You conquer so much territory that administering it becomes impossible. The edges start to fray. Local governors start making their own decisions because they have to. Think about the Soviet Union. 15 republics, 11 time zones, dozens of languages and ethnic groups, all held together by the idea that Moscow was in charge. The moment that idea started to crack, it cracked everywhere, at once. Or the British Empire, managing territories on 6 continents from a small island off the coast of Europe. At its peak, Britain controlled 25% of the world's land surface, and every single one of those territories eventually became too expensive, too rebellious, or too complicated to hold. Overextension isn't just a military problem. It's a resource problem, a focus problem. Every new territory costs soldiers to garrison it, administrators to run it, tax revenue to fund it. At some point, the empire costs more to maintain than it earns. And that is when things start to unravel.
Now here's the part of the Mongol story that nobody talks about enough, because it's almost too ironic to believe. The Mongols didn't just conquer China, they became Chinese. Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis, founded the Yuan dynasty and ruled China from 1271 to 1294. And during that time, he adopted Chinese court customs, Chinese governance, Chinese dress, Chinese religion. He moved the capital to what is now Beijing. He surrounded himself with Chinese advisors. The most feared military force in human history got so comfortable that within 2 generations, the ruling class had essentially forgotten how to be Mongols. Historians call this cultural assimilation. The conquered culture is so sophisticated, so deeply embedded, that it absorbs the conquerors, rather than the other way around. It happened to the Normans in England. 150 years after conquering England, the Norman ruling class spoke English and thought of themselves as English. It happened to countless others throughout history. And there's a modern version of this too. The tension between a nation's founding identity and the multicultural reality of empire is one of the defining political struggles of our time. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm saying it's a pattern. It happened before. It's happening now.
Genghis Khan had a succession problem, the same one that most powerful leaders refuse to think about until it's too late. He had multiple sons. He loved them all, and he divided the empire between them. On paper, this sounds reasonable. In practice, it's one of the most dangerous things a leader can do. Because once you divide an empire between heirs, you haven't preserved it. You've started a slow-motion civil war. By 1260, just 33 years after Genghis died, the empire had split into 4 separate khanates. And these weren't friendly neighbors. The Golden Horde in Russia and the Ilkhanate in Persia were actively at war with each other. Cousins. Fighting cousins. Over territory their grandfather had built. This is the succession crisis. And it's the second pattern you see in every collapsing empire. The moment a dominant leader disappears without a clear, legitimate successor, the factions held together by that leader's authority start pulling in different directions. Rome's late empire was essentially a series of civil wars. Different generals, different provinces, all claiming to be the rightful emperor. The Western Roman Empire had 20 emperors in just 50 years at one point. Every civil war weakened the whole. And today, we call it political polarization, institutional dysfunction, the inability to agree on who leads and what the shared project even is. The details are different. The mechanism is identical.
By the mid-1300s, the Mongol khanates were already weakened, fragmented,
culturally confused about their own identity. And then something happened that nobody could have predicted. The Black Death. The plague that killed 1/3 of Europe's population traveled along the Mongol trade routes. The Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace that had made trade across Eurasia safer than ever before, became the highway for the deadliest pandemic in recorded history. This is the final pattern in empire collapse. The external shock that an already weakened system cannot absorb. The system isn't destroyed by the shock alone. It's destroyed because the internal cracks were already there, and the shock turns cracks into fractures. Rome wasn't destroyed by the Visigoths. It was destroyed by 200 years of internal dysfunction that left it unable to respond to the Visigoths. The Soviet Union wasn't brought down by Ronald Reagan. It was brought down by 70 years of economic mismanagement that made it unable to compete. The external shock is just the last domino. The real question is, who set them up? So let's bring this home.
The Mongol Empire collapsed for 5 reasons: overextension, succession crisis, internal fragmentation, loss of cultural identity, and a catastrophic external shock that a weakened system couldn't survive. Look at any major power in the world right now and ask yourself, how many of those boxes are being checked? I'm not going to tell you which empire I think is next. That's not the point. The point is that this pattern is older than any modern nation-state. It predates democracy, capitalism, nuclear weapons, the internet. It's a feature of power itself. Empires rise because they find a formula that works better than anyone else's. They fall because that formula stops adapting. The Mongols were the greatest military innovators of their era, until they stopped innovating and started imitating the people they'd conquered. History doesn't repeat, but if you know what to look for, it rhymes loud enough to hear across 1,000 years. If this hit different for you, drop a comment with which modern parallel you think is the closest. And if you want to go deeper, my next video covers the Ottoman Empire collapse and why it basically drew the entire map of the modern Middle East. That one is wild. Links in the description. See you there.